Okay, we call this meeting of the Sebastian Budget Review Advisory Committee to order at 6 p.m. here on May the 15th, 2023. Janet, please call the roll.
We're going to do the pledge?
What?
Pledge.
Oh, okay. Let's do the pledge first. Pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Now let's have the roll, please.
Yes. Mr. Middleton?
Here.
Mr. Hoffman?
Here.
Mr. Napier?
Present.
Mr. McGinn?
Here.
I don't know if there's anyone on Zoom.
There is no one currently zoomed in.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, now the next is vote excused or unexcused absences. Who, has anybody called you, Ken, to say they wouldn't be here?
Yes, Grace Reed did call me today and said she could not make it this evening, so.
What's that?
Grace Reed.
Okay.
She did call today and cannot make the meeting. She was ill. And
So that's how many? Did you get 3?
no, I only got Grace Reed.
Oh, only Grace Reed.
I have not heard from Dave Newhart.
So then, Grace Reed will be an excused absence and the other ones will be unexcused.
Yes, Amber did contact me and said she would either be here or on Zoom, so I'm surprised she didn't log in, but maybe she had technical problems, I don't know.
Is that enough to be excused? Did she say she wasn't coming?
Probably not.
Yeah, well, it'll be unexcused then. Everybody okay with that?
Right. 1 excused, 3.
1 excused, the rest unexcused. Okay, we're good with that. Has everyone had a chance to read the minutes of the meeting from March 13th, 2023? And if so, I will entertain a motion to approve.
Motion to approve as presented.
Second.
Motion to approve by Bruce, and second. All those in favor signify with aye. Aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Okay, that motion's approved. Review of the second quarter financial report. Mr. Kilgore, you're up.
So as we typically do with the quarterly report, I will kind of go through and make some comments about the highlights. This is, we presented it in the format of an agenda transmittal that will go to the City Council next Wednesday night. Attached to the resolution adopting the budget changes is the breakdown of any changes that were made during the quarter. We did have several large items. One was to appropriate monies for the golf carts that we needed to get on order because of the long delivery date. We had the attorney recruitment process that we needed to allocate funds for the consultant to help with that. We had the pay rate changes for the exempt employees that was authorized by the council. We had the remodeling of the building department's front counter that had been budgeted in previous years, but that we finally got that in order, and in fact they are working on that remodeling now. We had the US 1 pattern paveway replacement. It's a contract with the FDOT, so we allocated additional funding for that based on cost estimates that were presented. We had the collective bargaining unit for the police officers, so we appropriated the monies for that approval, and we had the additional expenses on the golf cart batteries, trying to extend their life until the time that we get the new carts. So there were no adjustments out of the R&R account during the quarter, or in fact, in fact, for the year so far. The other adjustments were those that are authorized, or the city manager has authority to amend the budget for closed projects or other lesser monetary items. On page 7 of the report that was in the packet, the general fund revenues are 60.7% collected after 50% of the year, and expenditures are at 49.1%. Mostly that's the non-departmental category, and for those of you familiar with it, you know we make the annual CRA payment, and also some of our insurance premiums are due early in the year, so that's why that account is well over 50%. The American Rescue Plan Act, we've had good experience with our interest earnings, as I'm sure y'all are aware of the changing environment with that. And because of that, the provisions of the Act allow you to allocate the interest earnings for any governmental purpose. It's not restricted like the other American Rescue Funds are. So we did have a couple of needs that came up during the quarter. We allocated for a water supply work plan study that was requested, and some grant money for artificial reefs. So that'll come out of the interest earnings portion of those revenues in that fund. As far as the general fund balance forecast on page 7, I've captured the adjustments that I have already gone over this evening on that affected the general fund reserves, and accounted for the R&R account, which is still at the $275,000 level. On page 8, the stormwater fund, the golf course fund, and building department, the projected ending resources for this year in all cases exceed the amount that we had projected those balances to be by the end of this year. The airport, we had the beginning resources in the airport fund were somewhat less than we had projected in the budget, so that accounts really for the a little bit less in ending resources projected than we had originally thought we would have when we went into this budget year.
Can I ask a couple, we'll call these learning questions, okay?
Okay.
You've probably told me before, but what is the R&R account again?
A number of years ago, we carved out $275,000 out of our general fund reserve money because we recognized that, particularly at that time, we had gone a number of years of really tight budgets, and we assumed that we probably weren't maintaining or repairing some of our equipment. Excuse me. So I did introduce that to the city council at that time to say, well, let's give management a $275,000 to take care of some of those needs that caught up with us.
We used to call that a bag, okay, yeah. So what
Well,
does the R&R stand for?
in some cities, you see contingency accounts, but we wanted to stay away from a contingency because that's just a temptation.
Oh, replacement.
So if the department head comes to me and says, I've got a piece of machinery or a building that needs repairs that weren't provided for in this year's budget because we thought we were going to get a few more years out of that item, then the city manager is authorized then to go ahead and act on that. Still would have to get bids according to our purchasing guidelines. But it's just so it just allows us that efficiency of being able to go ahead and act on those replacements or
Green
repairs.
light comes on, that's when it's live. Push the button and the green light comes on and the microphone comes on.
Well, I know that, he moved it from there to there, I think it was great when he
Yeah.
Yeah, the R and R is repair and replacement, I believe, is what we
Renewal
initially,
and
or
Yes,
renewal
that-
and replace, something like that, yes.
But it is just carved out of the general fund reserves. It's not separate from that.
Since I interrupted, I have a second question. On all of these summaries, the budget is, the budget for the year, and the year-to-date is just that, the year-to-date. So for most accounts, the year-to-date, halfway through, would be about 50%, but in some cases, it's below 30%. Now, I know some of this is because income is end-loaded, but are we really spending that much lower by the second quarter?
I think you'll find in general fund, there's not a lot of departments that are really that far out of, they're pretty close to the 50%.
Some of those revenue streams are like 60 days behind
I
the
understand that.
thing. So when you close out September, he has to accrue those revenues and bring them back in and put them in. So they're always gonna be a little bit behind. That's a lot of those state shared revenues.
Let me table that question until deeper into the report, there are some specific areas that look really low. And it leads me to a question later about.
Which specific areas give you concern?
Well, some of the departments are at 32% halfway through the year, so that either means they're the best budgeters in the world, or they're running so understaffed that they can't spend the money. And,
Well, I don't know. That would depend on whether it was in salaries or what other line item it was in that was under.
I'll bring it up
Which
again.
departments are you speaking of?
I'll bring it up again when we get there.
Okay.
Okay, so on pages 9 through 14, that's the more detailed account balances. I don't usually go into any specifics on that. I don't know if that was one of your questions.
Yeah. This is one example, community development.
Mhm.
And I follow that one closely, and they've only spent 31% of their budget through 2 quarters.
Probably if we look at page 14. I can tell you that the section on community development, you say where personal services are 37.6.
Right.
Operating is 8.6, and I think a large reason for that is there was some contractual services funding that hadn't been spent yet.
Okay.
So by the time they entered into that contract and got
Are they
results of
also-
the work,
Are they also short personnel too?
they went, I believe they may be fully staffed now, but they did have a couple of vacancies early in the year before those were filled or replacements were.
Thank you.
Yeah, that's the advertisement that's been flashing down on Riverview Park's
Right,
billboard, right? Community development
right.
person, yeah.
Okay.
That was up there for a couple of months. It's still up, okay, so see there, yeah.
You good?
Frankly, I brought these up because I spend a lot of time here, and I think that generally the staff is pretty understaffed and working very hard, and it shows in the budget, but it's also a dangerous place to be. Thank you.
Okay.
Can I point out that the general, or the community development has pretty much been in the same ballpark for their second quarter actuals since 2019? So, if you look back to 2019,
Very
they're
good
actually
point.
in the ballpark that they had been in since 2019.
Right, in the second quarter of 2019, they were at 74,000 in operating expenses. so they were 262,000 in 19. They're actually $40,000 higher in,
Is that the second quarter, or is that for the year?
no, that's second quarter actually.
Okay.
Well, there again, that may very well have been because of contractual services during that year, with some of their comprehensive plan activities that they were doing at that time. Okay. On page 15 is a breakdown of all the outstanding capital projects that we've established. A good part of those remaining balances are some major projects that we have going on in the American Recovery Plan. We also have some hopefully FEMA money that will be matched with DST funds for the canal restoration. We've got some grant funding with the Runway 523 rehabilitation. But not to get stuck on all the details, but some of those projects also I can say that are underway, or the bids have been accepted, or the contracts have been are in the works for, in particular, the construction of 4 square hangars. I think the Gardenia Ditch project is starting to move.
Ken, can I ask you about 2 of the projects since we're on this page from 2021, the phone system? We're 2 years out and we still haven't completed the installation of a new phone system?
There was a small balance, I think, that she was still holding on to.
Yeah, well, it says $16,000.
No, I'm sure we'll be closing that out.
Yeah, geez, I can't
For sure
think
in
it
this
takes
year.
2 years to put in a new phone system, unless something really got... How about the Yacht Club seawall? I thought that project was finished and done. Are we gonna close that one out? We got $7,000 left, but it looks to me, I walk by there 3-4 times a week, and
Some of that tied in with the hurricane activity, the Irma and Nicole, where it did some damages along the shoreline there, and I think that kind of overlapped some of the work they had planned to do on that, and they've held off to get it all
yeah.
done
okay,
as one activity.
thanks.
Yeah, and Ken, I also noticed that the airport and the stormwater fund and some of these other enterprise funds, some of these other special revenue funds have a lot of infrastructure money being spent for capital projects, but I see none at the golf course. Is there a reason for that? Why aren't recreation impact fees being spent at the golf course?
The rec impact fees have been allocated mostly to other community parks in the city. There's not a lot of excess available there. I think the other issue is that back, about 6 years ago, when we went in, we upgraded the irrigation system at the golf course, the clubhouse. We did all those major improvements. Certainly, those are going to come back round in time, but there's really not been any there's been some activity on repairs, minor.
Well, I noticed the airport seems to get a lot of DST money spent, and the stormwater fund does. And the stormwater fund has its own revenue stream that's put on our tax bill. And I don't understand the difference between how we treat the golf course and how we treat these other funds that get their own money. I fail to understand that.
I was gonna save my comments for the next page on the same subject.
Yeah, I just don't understand that. That goes beyond me why the golf course is treated different than every other fund in the city.
But it kind of balances out when you look at
Well,
how
it
much.
doesn't when everybody else gets discretionary sales tax that they don't have to pay back, and some of them, the airport pays back some, I see that.
What, I
But
was-
the stormwater pay back that money.
Larry, I was gonna
Now,
say.
see, but I mean, they put money in the stormwater fund, and that doesn't have to get paid back, and it gets its own revenue. I just don't understand the difference. I don't understand why the golf course is treated one way, and everything else is treated another way.
I had a question that comes from a different angle, and that is, my question on the next page was going to be, why does the golf course have over $2 million in loans out, and on some of them, they don't pay any interest? They're having a good year. Sandridge is having such a good year that they're putting annual fees onto leagues. They've chased a lot of people into Sebastian, which makes Sebastian have a better year. But there's a lot of money out to the golf course that is at little to no interest compared to some of the other loans that we've made. I've never it took me 5
Yeah, but
sessions.
my point is, those loans were for capital projects that could have been paid for by infrastructure funds
Oh, they
or
could be-
recreation impact fee funds, but they weren't.
Okay.
That's the point.
But they're not being paid back either. They're being paid back at a very slow
The golf
rate.
course, their loans are being paid back. If you read
Slowly.
this financial statement, they're in there and they are being paid back.
I did.
Yeah, the golf course has paybacks for the building department and the general fund, correct, Ken? And they are paying back that money
But at a very slow rate.
that was borrowed.
They get a $500,000 balance on a cash flow loan, they're only paying back $35,000 a year with no interest. And if we're a budget committee, I mean, that makes no sense to me.
Well, it's all right for cities to loan interfund transfers without interest. They're not required to charge interest. They can if they wish to market interest, but they're not required to.
But of all of the groups that we have, they have an inordinate amount of loans outstanding, almost $2 million. And nobody, not any other department is anywhere close to that. So my point was gonna be, the airport's paying 3% interest. The golf course is paying 0% interest and T-bond minus 1% interest. They really getting a good deal, and yet they're making money this year. They're doing better than they ever have.
Well, they're really not getting a deal because those funds were eligible to be spent for recreation impact fees and infrastructure sales tax fees, but they weren't. They took them out of the golf course. They let all the other funds have infrastructure funds, and look at the recreation impact fees that are being doled out throughout all these things.
Well,
The golf course is the largest recreational amenity that the city of Sebastian has.
Yes,
It gets nothing from recreation impact fees.
But it's
That's
still-
what I don't understand.
But Larry, they're the only ones who have a big revenue stream. They're the only ones who charge.
What does
a
that
lot.
matter?
Huh?
What does that, the airport has a big revenue stream,
Okay.
but it gets infrastructure money to help fund its projects when they get FDOT and FAA grants to fund them.
I want to let you know, I'm not against the golf course. I like the golf course. I think we.
Sounds like you are.
No, I go on record to say it, I am not. I just don't know why they get.
I don't know why the golf course is treated different than any other fund in the city. That's what I don't understand, and I've never understood that since I've been here. But it must be it's a city policy not to put that money there, right?
Yeah.
In past years, it was introduced to the city council for approval.
Yeah.
In the case of the airport, going back to that, when they built hangar A and B, the attitude was that, oh, they need to borrow that money from the DST fund. So they are still paying for those two hangars. Hangar C and D are DST funded along with the grant funds. With the golf course, it was a similar kind of thing. At the time, the irrigation system, the $700,000 was needed. Am I being bad? At the time the $700,000 was needed, it was presented to the council that this should be
Yeah.
a loan. And I came up with the interest rate of 1% below the 10-year
Well, I
treasury
just see a
bill.
big difference the way the golf course is treated than the way all the other funds are treated, and I don't understand why that is.
It's been the attitude at the time the project was initiated.
There's one final comment. We're the budget committee, so we get to observe, but we don't make the policy, right?
Well,
not
we
to say
make
that-
recommendations to the
Yeah,
city
recommend.
council, that's all we do.
Right.
Yeah, we don't set policy, city
Exactly.
council sets policy.
We've been down that road before.
Yeah,
Right.
we do not set policy, and we do not tell them, we just make recommendations.
Right.
And I've been asking these questions for years, and they never seem to be answered. I mean, they're not answered to me satisfactorily. I don't understand why the golf course doesn't get recreation impact fees allotted in its budget for some of the capital improvements out there. I fail to understand that.
Ken, does the golf course contribute their income stream back into the general fund?
Yes,
Not as a contribution. They pay for services provided by the general fund, so the
it's a
finance.
G&A charge, a general
Finance
administrative overhead charge for the administrative things that the city does for the golf course.
But
And if you see, the golf course pays more than any other fund in the city of Sebastian to the general fund. I don't see any other fund that pays more money back to the general fund than the golf course.
we don't charge enough to the kids for playing baseball, I guess that's the problem.
No, that allocation is made on a formula that we apply, and we take into account the activity that's needed or,
Right.
then the golf course, I know from finance's point of view, daily cash receipts, auditing of their inventories, there's a lot more than, the activity needed for the building department, because they handle their receipts, because they're on site, so it's a different process than having to collect them from the golf course and input them into the system. So, I mean, there's a rationale behind those charges, but they are substantial. When you look at all the building fund pays,
Well, I understand the G&A charges. I mean, I can understand that. And I can understand the rent to the airport, which I think is a little high. I think was that ever changed in the FAA lease that they had to analyze that once every 5 years and do a calculation based on the consumer price index? That used to be in the lease.
I don't recall any language in the current leases.
Yeah, that was in the lease with the FAA and the city when they got the airport property.
Yeah, but the rent has changed several times over.
Yeah, and it's gone up a
Over the-
lot more than the CPI has.
Well, it
So
came
my
down.
point is,
It
how
came
does it go
down.
up more than the CPI?
Oh, but it came down too. I know when I first got here, the rent dropped. That was paid to the airport from the golf course. It dropped.
You know how much it is now, Bruce?
Well, I'd have to go look at
It's
the
still over
number.
120, it's 120 grand a
Yeah,
year.
it went back up. It was down to,
Close to
it was down to 90,000 or 80,000. It was lower. But
It
then it
was-
went back up. Yeah, we dropped it when
But if you go back and
when the
trace the
recession
CPI
and,
all the way
and-
through the index up, that rent is still much higher than what the CPI would have been had they followed that lease. And I don't know that that lease was ever changed. I think the city just changed it by resolution. Was that ever approved by the FAA?
My understanding that it's submitted to the FAA, but
Of course, the FAA doesn't care as long as the airport's getting the money. That's the FAA's position. But my position is, are we overcharging the golf course based on what the lease says we ought to be charging them?
yeah, the original lease had an
Because
enormous.
that's supposed to be analyzed once every 5 years. Have those conditions ever been changed in that?
I'm not aware of that condition. That's the first I've heard of that.
Well, I know I did that when I was here. I did 2 5-year adjustments. I got here in 87, the golf course opened in 81, it should have been done in 86 and it wasn't.
But they had
I
some,
did one in 87, then I did one in 91.
they had some major cost increase or.
Yeah.
Or
And that
escalation.
was a function of the change in the CPI index over that previous 5 years, and it just wasn't, the rent didn't change that much.
But we took some major action back 15 years ago to basically throw out that initial lease and those escalation charges and
Right.
and we brought it back down to the $100,000 amount. They added a parcel, rent on the maintenance building. That was like $6,000, I believe, for that. There was something else just a couple of years ago that I think brought it around to
Yeah,
about that
right,
120,000 level.
I mean, we still do that every 5 years, right? We still do that every 5 years. We do the calculation on the CPI for the change in the rent that goes to the airport, right, from the golf course?
Actually, I don't
And the only reason that the golf course pays more is because it's a non-aviation related use. So when the FAA, when they allowed us to put the golf course out there, they went to a market value rent instead of an aviation related use. Fixed base operators out there pay a lot less rent per acre and per whatever, and that's because it's an aviation related use, which the golf course is not. And I just think somebody should look at, over the course of time, that rent seems to have been escalated a lot more than what the CPI was.
I don't follow what grant you're talking about.
Well, I can remember back when a few people were here and they raised that rent and they didn't follow that.
Oh, the rent.
Yeah, the rent
lease
that the
agreement,
golf
yeah.
course pays the airport. And I understand that the golf course will pay a market value rent because that's in the lease with the FAA. That's in the grant that gave the property to the city. They gave the airport to the city. And it's a non-aviation related use, and they paid a little more. They paid a little more per acre. But it seems to me like it got out of line, because when I go back and look at how the CPI is done over those 5 years in each of those increments, the rent is a lot higher than what it should be, based on that, just that index. And what I'm asking is, did that index change? Was that changed with the FAA, where the city was allowed to charge more than what the CPI did?
Larry, why don't you just pose it as a question in the minutes and then we can check it in?
Yeah, I mean, that's
Get
all
back
I'm
to it.
asking, is
Well,
I
I
just
can
need an
answer.
answer to that question. It may have changed, I don't know.
Well, we'll find out. I have a question. He turned you off again.
Every time that rent amount changed, then by resolution and a new lease agreement executed that was. I am.
Yeah, he's messing with you. No,
It's off now, the green light's not on.
you gotta turn it on and off, Ken, yeah.
There you go.
So every time that lease has been changed, it is reviewed.
I mean, it's just a question I have, it's not, you know, it seems to me like the golf course is being overcharged a little bit. And then they don't get any of the other amenities that the other, enterprise funds and other funds in the city receive from recreation impact fees and discretionary sales tax. I don't see any discretionary sales tax going into the golf course, nor do I see any recreation impact fees going into the golf course. And for the life of me, I can't understand why.
Larry, a question on the same note. The council just approved 500.
You got red.
Oh, the council just approved 584,000 for new golf carts, right?
Yeah, but that's money out of the golf course fund.
Well, that's what I was gonna ask you, where is that gonna be paid?
That's coming out of the golf course money.
Do they have 584, or do they have to borrow it? What's,
I assume it's in the budget, I assume they had cash for it, it's put in the budget, that means they got money for it.
I'm expecting by the time those carts are delivered in January, we will have sufficient cash on hand in the golf course for it to pay those.
That'll be, and they're supposed to be here in January, right, of '24?
Yes.
That's what I understand.
so they have a lot of money.
Yeah, they have a lot of money, the golf course generates a lot of money.
But you want them to have more.
Well, you're missing my point. My point
Yeah,
is,
I
why
got
are they treated different than every other fund in the city?
Just messing with you, Lenny.
I mean, I don't understand why they don't get recreation impact fees and why they don't get discretionary sales tax money for improvements out there. It's the largest recreation amenity in this city, other than the Barber Street Sports Complex.
But they also bring in the most money, so they're almost.
They're bringing more money than every other enterprise fund in the city.
Which makes them self-sustaining, except for all the loans that they have.
All enterprise funds are required to be self-sustaining by definition of governmental regulations, right,
But
Ken?
they're intended to be self-sustaining. They don't have to be
They
self-sustaining.
should be. I mean, if you're loaning money from someplace else to an enterprise fund, it should not be an enterprise fund. If it can't stand its own weight.
Well, you just said that, but they got a $1.7 million loan to them. That was my point.
A
At
$1.7 million
0%.
loan?
At 0%.
Exactly.
I mean, I would take you mentioned another fund that was paying back at 3% interest. How much does that equal? And if the golf course is paying back their money at 0%, there's a benefit right there.
It's actually the airport fund is paying at 3% and then for 5 years and then 4% for 25 years.
So that 0% interest rate has value.
Oh, it has a big value. And
Yeah, but it also, what you're missing, the point you're missing is, they shouldn't have had to borrow that money if they would use infrastructure money and recreation impact fees and paid those expenses to fix that stuff.
we don't know that.
And well,
We-
yeah, I know
We actually
that.
don't know that.
I know that. I know they needed to fix the irrigation out there for 10 years and they didn't do it. They didn't repair it. They waited till they had to replace the whole thing and it cost $1 million to replace it.
Hey, by the way, I do like golf.
It's just questions I have. I just fail to see the difference. I don't, there may be a difference in the city's view of it, but I don't see it.
Well,
And maybe you do. Maybe you can
Well,
tell us
there's-
why
there's
they get treated differently.
they happened at different points in time, and the attitudes at that particular point in time when those investments were made
Uh-huh.
required either because there wasn't other resources available in the DST fund or the rec impact fees. You know, and this was maybe the only way at that point in time that some of these projects were able to be done. So,
Well, I know it's a matter of budget priority. I mean, I understand that. I understand that. But I see recreation impact fees being spent on a lot of stuff, and I just fail to see why we don't, like the nets out there on the driving range. The things have been trashed for a couple of years, and you hit a golf ball, it doesn't hit the net and drop down anymore, it goes through the net. Those nets are rotted.
They're already scheduled to be replaced. In fact, they're in process right now.
They're not replaced yet, and there's holes all over that place out there if you play out there. And you don't want to be on the first or the ninth fairway when somebody's on that driving range that hits pretty wild because they hit them, it goes right through that net.
That was actually discussed at the city council
And,
meeting.
yeah, and it's dangerous. I mean, it's dangerous. You can get hit with a golf ball. You don't even know where it's coming from.
They're on the schedule. They're actually working on them now, I believe.
Have you been out there and looked at those nets? There's holes everywhere.
I've been too busy chasing a hotel, so.
Okay. I was out there this morning. Okay, let's move on to something else. Enough of that.
really, the only other thing I wanted to mention is of course, the interest rates on our cash balances are climbing, which is due to the marketplace. And even the Florida Trust investment has turned into a positive gain this last quarter, so that's encouraging.
I have one more question that I wrote down. The building fund for this building, isn't it close to being paid off? Aren't we very close to having isn't there a big mortgage on this building?
Absolutely not.
no.
We don't have a mortgage on it.
Oh, okay.
That's been paid off for over 2 years. Yeah.
Yeah.
I got bad information from somebody.
Mortgages,
For your information, the city can't mortgage its assets. They have to borrow money on revenue streams, so they can't pledge an asset as collateral.
Then excuse me, I had somebody who was supposed to know tell me that the mortgage was close to being paid off, so I guess
Well, the loans that were made to build the building
yeah,
have been recently paid off in the last
couple
year.
of years ago.
okay.
2 years ago, 3 years ago?
It's not a mortgage though,
It's a loan.
it's bonded debt.
Well,
They don't, you
well-
can't,
Wrong choice of words, okay.
you can't mortgage governmental property in the state of Florida. It's illegal under state law.
Okay.
So you can't pledge your assets for debt. You have to pledge a revenue stream or something else, which is what they've done on these. It was the infrastructure tax revenue stream that was pledged to pay back the money they borrowed on
I
the
just got
building.
I got bad information from somebody
Yeah.
who should have
Well,
known
there's a
better.
lot of bad information that floats around because people don't know what they're talking about.
Okay.
You know, and it's too bad, but people listen to that. And that's usually what they believe instead of what the facts are. If you want the facts, come to this guy. Mr. Kilgore can give you the facts.
Mr. Kilgore's a rock star.
Yeah, I don't know if I'd call him a rock star. I'd call him a good CFO.
Thank you. That's all the presentation I had, unless you have other questions.
Yeah, Ken, I have one question, and this is very easy. At the bottom of page 6, where you talk about the adjustments for vehicles and equipment, and adjustment to close remaining unexpended balance of community development, is SUV meaning a vehicle, or is there another?
Yeah, that was sports utility vehicle.
Okay,
That was a,
okay. So that's
Vehicle they had budget-
actually what SUV means, like an SUV.
yeah.
Sports utility vehicle.
Yeah, right. Well, you know, there are so many.
Acronyms, a lot of them in our business, no doubt.
I have a question. Looking forward, when do you predict that we start the next budgeting process? Is it in the July meeting? I thought it was usually sooner than that.
Well, we've actually already started. He won't get the estimate of the values till.
When you say
You get the
yeah.
preliminary June 1st.
Terry,
The we is
You
Ken.
have your agenda, that came?
Right.
Everything's on, yeah, you've got it, right there it is, everything's there.
Yeah.
Yeah, we've been working, of course, we've had the labor negotiations and some uncertainty there about how to do some of the projections, but hopefully, by this Friday, the department heads are supposed to submit their requests for operating supplies, contractual services. They've already submitted their capital budget request. To be honest with you, I have been kind of behind, but I'm now in the process of focusing on on the capital budget to kind of structure that, so I know where we're going on most of our special revenue funds. But Larry pointed out that by June 30th, we should get an estimate on the taxable values for ad valorem taxes. I can tell you, I've looked at the revenue streams from our state revenue sharing funds, the ones that affect general fund. They are kind of flat. I mean, they'll be probably close to the budgeted amount, but they're not kicking off extra money. The revenues from utility taxes, franchise fees that come in as a general fund source of revenue, they are going gangbusters. So, of course, I'll be conservative because I don't want to get, over optimistic, but my guesstimate at this point, just to give you a heads up, is that probably most of the pay increases that we've been negotiating are possible to cover with our expected revenues for next year for general fund. Some of the other funds, it may be questionable, but as far as general fund goes, most of those increases in pay rates will probably be handled. When we talk about additional people, which has been brought up at city council meetings and and I think some of y'all have noticed the need probably for additional staff people, and that's going to be the nut to crack.
Ken?
But are they not pursuant to y'all had a payroll study done, right?
Right.
And I assume you're adjusting salaries to what that study recommended that those should be.
For that point in time, yeah.
Yeah,
Even though, yeah.
but changes every year, Ken. Yeah,
Yes.
of course it does.
But they've also, all the contracts do call for, it's a 3-year contract, and they do call for 5% raises coming this October and the year after.
Yeah.
So, like I say, I'm confident that we can balance the budget in a status quo type mode. It's going to be the extras that everybody has been discussing.
And I noticed we're giving sign-us bonuses for different positions. They're giving sign-on bonuses, right? I saw that in an ad, right? They paying,
We did institute that about a year and a half ago,
they're still doing that, right? Yeah, yeah.
which presumably helps with the recruitment.
Ken, I apologize for not looking at my schedule. It's somewhere under a pile of, I didn't look at but I did see,
It should be in the back of your first pack that you got.
well, I have it. I'm just admitting I didn't look at it. But I wanted to make the point that we're the budget board, the committee. There's turnover. We've got charter offices being replaced. It's getting very difficult to hire people. We're understaffed by a factor of, I forget the percentage from 5 years ago, but you're actually operating with substantially less than you were 5 years ago. And something's got to give, and this is the year it's going to give. And when we do the budget review, we need to keep that in mind, because succession is a dangerous thing, and when you start losing people, you lose them all. And I don't like to preach doom, but this has been a great city, and we need to keep the staff up to make sure it stays that way. And that's more important than rollback, in my opinion. It is way more important than rollback.
Yeah, but succession is that's an administrative function. That's not a function of this committee.
Oh, it is when you drive the budget. Thank you.
Our next meeting of the Budget Committee will be July 17th. And that'll be the meeting that I present the initial draft by staff of
That's when you'll have the tentative budget to us, at that meeting on the 17th of July.
Larry, I'll be on Zoom for that meeting, so you have the pleasure of muting me if you want.
Any other questions?
No, any other,
Can we go to general discussion?
now we're having general discussion by members, and we'll start down with Mr. Middleton.
The only question I had, I guess, in the upcoming quarter or the upcoming budget, and this may be a sore subject, have anyone looked at, or are we anticipating anything to do with the city manager position in regards to contract payout or PTO payout or anything like that with his departure? Or is that going to change that department's budget at all in a significant way?
I couldn't predict that.
I've been at the council meetings, and I think the more important thing, it is what it is because he gave his resignation, but the more important thing is there's going to be some serious recruiting costs. And if you followed any of the Treasure Coast, East Coast of Florida, county and city position turnovers recently, it's gonna be an expensive proposition.
That's why I bring it up. I know that someone departing at that level can be a costly enterprise.
Well, that and the city attorney, they have located a city attorney and they're in the process of, they've located a city attorney and they're in the process of finishing that contract negotiation. It's not
Well, that's
finished.
recommended. They're waiting for the 30-day resignation before they can go to a contract with the lady.
Right,
It's one of the ladies that interviewed. I watched those interviews.
yeah, they were interesting. The point is, that's 2 charter offices and that has a cost. And we don't know the cost, and Ken doesn't even know the cost yet, so.
Okay. Bruce?
Ken, I have 2 questions, one involving, charter. So, with the resignation of the city manager, who assumes the $15,000 approval for like R&R projects?
He
Does
still
that-
does. He's here till June
They'll-
9th.
Well, yeah, but after June 9th, basically.
They will
I mean,
appoint an interim city manager, I'm
Well-
sure.
Yeah, the one filling that position would be responsible, yes.
Okay, that wouldn't pass to you automatically on a
Um,
downward slope, or?
Actually, everything we spend passes my desk.
Okay.
I mean, I see every invoice, I see credit
Yeah,
card.
you've got a limit up to certain authority, right? And then the city manager has over that.
Well, everything over the $750 requires a purchase order.
Right.
And those purchase orders get approved by not only Jennifer
Right.
Smith in my office, but myself, the purchasing manager, and then the city manager.
Okay, one more. The change with waste management and the change that will happen to transfer, will we account for those funds that come through the tax? Will trash collection or whatever become an enterprise fund, or are you gonna run that through the general fund? Because like, we still pay, we have the tax.
They're gonna bill
Coming
people till
through.
it goes on it. They're
Yeah,
gonna-
I know that, but I'm talking about 2024 when it changes. Have you given that any thought? It won't be handed like stormwater. I mean, the stormwater comes through the tax, it's a one-time, just like this is gonna be, but that's an enterprise fund.
I think
Well,
I could,
no, the storm,
that's not how it's gonna work.
It's what? Well, then, okay,
Yeah.
will we handle waste management as a special revenue fund, or?
No.
Yeah,
touch it again.
Yeah, it's gonna be collected on the real estate
It'll be
tax.
collected on the tax bill and the
Right.
tax
right,
collector
the
pays
same way,
that.
but that's the same way the stormwater charge is collected through the tax
Yeah, but the
bill.
stormwater charge comes to the city.
Right, the garbage collection goes to waste management.
The stormwater comes to the city in a special revenue fund.
Right.
And then the expenses of that operation are accounted for from those revenues.
Right.
Well, will waste management be the
I'm-
same way?
No, waste management, it'll be directly from the tax office to waste management, I think. Is that right?
I am inclined to think that it'll be a special revenue fund
Oh,
so that I can demonstrate to the public that those tax collections that we get via the county
Yeah, they should come here to the
come
city.
into us, and then we pay waste
Yeah,
management
and
for
we
the
would pay
service.
waste management for the
So
service.
I need a method to
Right,
kind
so
of
if the,
account.
so if the service flubs, we can kind of hold them to the,
that's a complex situation.
well, of course it is, but you should have some control over the monies, yeah.
Yeah, because
Well, it's a mandatory service. the controls already put in there by the city's ordinance. It's gonna be mandatory that everybody uses that service and it's put on the tax bill.
Right, but I would like that, I would think that's an appropriate way to handle that through a revenue fund, just like the stormwater funds are.
I mean, it is,
We don't get the solid waste money. Indian River County has a solid waste fee on the tax bill. It's on the tax bill that the residents of Sebastian pay, but it doesn't come to the city, it goes to the county
Yeah,
from the
because
tax collector.
those are county funds. They're not our funds, they're for the county.
Well,
They're not,
it's not
but the
our
city-
funds for waste management either, it's theirs.
No, they're being, yeah, like, just
Nah,
like.
it's put on the tax bill. When it goes on the tax bill, that will be something that the
Yeah, but
tax
they
collector
don't-
collects.
I don't think they should be paid directly.
Mr. Hoffman, I've been following that very closely, and I think that the situation is far more complex than that. They've still got to work out some issues. For example, they had 17% failure to pay invoices and their uncollectibles. It's a bigger issue than just setting up a fund. And
But that goes away when it's on the tax bill. If you don't pay the non-ad valorem assessments on your tax bill,
Right.
they issue a notice to do a sale on the notice. You can pay your ad valorem tax and you don't have to pay that transfer fee if you don't want to, but if you don't pay it, the county's gonna sell a tax certificate on that property
Right.
for that portion of the money. And it goes to the unit that it's on the tax bill for. Those are non-ad valorem assessments and it's right on your tax bill. And this will be on the tax bill when they get it there, right, Ken?
similar to the stormwater fees, and they do break out the amount for the current billing.
Right.
Current year billing versus the delinquent or past.
Now, we get the stormwater fee, but that's because that's our charge. The stormwater
Right.
fee that's on the tax bill is our charge and the tax collector pays us. They give us that money just like they do the property tax, the ad valorem tax when they put it through.
Correct.
As they collect it,
Well,
they,
why wouldn't this be our charge? It's our charge, we're setting it.
well, it's not our charge, we're putting it on there for waste management.
See, I disagree with you. We're making the charge.
No, we
And
will.
we're paying waste
If
management.
it goes on the tax bill, we're not responsible for it, are we, Ken?
We will have to show a separate revenue account in the city as well as an expenditure account to waste management and an expenditure account to the county for the service. So that's why I'm kind of thinking just collect that all in one
Right.
special.
But right
revenue.
now, waste management is still gonna be billing quarterly till
Well,
we
yeah,
get.
they're doing that, but I'm just asking about the future and how that would.
Well, when it's on the tax bill, that's when, you know, the property appraiser puts it on the bill and the tax collector collects the money when you pay your taxes. I can't imagine that they would be distributing that money to us for us to give it to waste management, would they?
Sure.
Now, we have to pay waste management from the city's funds that would come from those collections of the tax, from the tax
So
collector.
you're all gonna set it up to come to the city instead of going direct to the waste management?
Absolutely, yes.
Yeah.
Does that also include commercial or only residential?
No, only the residential is
Right.
universal, as they call it.
Commercial is non.
It's direct
Yeah,
waste
it's not
management.
covered by that.
Right.
Commercial continues as a subscription service, yes. Just like it is
It's a
now.
good question, Bruce.
I think that's the way it should work, yeah. Yeah. And then, and just go on, to, your question about delinquencies is gonna be resolved.
It's-
Because
it's a
if
moot
they,
issue.
if they don't pay,
Yeah.
it gets sold, the
That's it.
county
They'll
sells
have a
it
tax
through the tax
certificate.
bill, through the
That's right.
tax certificate, right, that's
That's
the
right.
collection mechanism. That's already, you can just see that's resolved, that's not it.
Yeah, it's a non-issue.
Yeah,
And
yeah, who
that
cares,
fixes it.
who cares if the
That's
delinquent,
after-
who
that's
cares
after
if the delinquency's
2024.
50%, that, sell the tax debt, yep.
When it goes on the tax bill, you're not
Yeah.
gonna have any delinquencies.
Yeah,
That's not until 2024, and we have an interim situation, right, Ken?
well, we
Yeah.
don't have it, waste management has it.
Yeah, waste management will still be billing everybody that has the collection quarterly until that happens, is my understanding, right? They still send you bills
Right.
quarterly like they always have done.
Right, yeah.
It just be at a new rate.
They are billing all residential properties, is my
Yeah, they're gonna,
understanding.
yeah,
Yes.
Brett, they're gonna bill us.
Yeah, they'll continue to bill that quarterly until October of 2024, I believe.
Yeah.
Exactly. The council's managed to eat up about 2 weeks discussing this, so I don't think we have enough time.
What I don't understand is why we give them universal collection and they get to raise the fee. And it's gonna go on the tax bill.
That's not a subject for this meeting, though.
Terrence, you got anything?
I ran out of comments.
I don't either. I think I've harped enough. I will, say the general discussion by the members is over. The next scheduled meeting date is, Monday, July 17th, 2023. That's when we will have our tentative budget and all that stuff, right? We'll have all that stuff out by then.
Should be.
Okay. Anybody have anything they want to add to that? That's when he will give us a tentative budget on the, they'll know what the property values are gonna be from the property appraiser and all that stuff.
Yes.
July 17th. Next thing on the agenda is adjournment of the meeting. This meeting is adjourned.